What's up, Knicks fans? We are back again for another season with our friends at Fanatics Sportsbook. And of course, that means we're talking about FANCASH. Now, most sportsbooks, their rewards are just fluff, but FANCASH is the ultimate sports currency. You see, when you bet with Fanatics Sportsbook, you get up to 10% FANCASH back on your wagers, win or lose. And did I mention that they're giving away millions in FANCASH this year, and you can use that FANCASH on anything in the Fanatics universe? Go check it out for yourself and download the app today. Fanatics Sportsbook. Winning hits different here.
All right. So the ship is not sinking after all. Knicks steer the course a little bit, right the ship with a much needed 128-116 win over the Chicago Bulls. I'm DJ Zullo with you for the Knicks Film School Postgame Show presented by Fanatics Sportsbook. 7-game homestand off on the right foot. This really did feel like a get me right type game. With a little help from the shot variance gods, as the Knicks made seemingly every three-pointer up through about the fourth quarter when the shots started to miss a little bit. But there was at one point the Knicks had taken over 30 threes and were upwards of close to 60% from three. I don't think they missed the free throw the entire game unless they missed one late that I missed. But a brilliant shooting game by a Knicks squad that desperately needed a win. We can talk about maybe later on the desperation and anxiety that was permeating amongst the fan base. And I think amongst the players too, after a 3-game losing streak, every team save for the elite of the elite will have streaks like this, 3-game losing streaks, 4-game losing streaks where things just don't go right. And because of all the things we've talked about, the new head coach, the pressure on this team coming into this year to win, the roster they have assembled, and the fact that this 3-game losing streak happened early in the season adds to that sort of anxiety, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing, because I think there are certain games where you see teams, and we've seen this Knicks team do it plenty in the Jalen Brunson era, where things aren't going well, and you feel it before the game starts, where they just need to get off on the right foot and get a win and use that anxiety, that maybe some bad vibes to your favor, and go out and put your stamp on the game and get a win. And that's exactly what they did tonight, led by their superstar. And I could start this in any number of directions in terms of the players. And I think, myself included, we all fall into the trap sometimes of taking Jalen Brunson for granted. He came out in that first quarter, and he's done this a few times this year, where he clearly has this intention to put his imprint on the game early and often. Scored 19 points in this one to start the game in that first quarter, and clearly displayed a level of aggression, a confrontational nature to his game that sort of represented what this team was coming out to do, which was to get a win, an important win. And it's going to be led by Jalen Brunson. There was more Brunson brilliance, and on the year now, stats have been updated, 31 points per game. He's up to 48% from the field, 56% on twos, and this is even with him shooting only 33% on the year from three. You know that number is going to start creeping up a little bit. But his floor game, his ability to score in so many different ways, get into the paint and make those paint decisions. You know, the Knicks brought in a assistant coach, TJ Saint, who's on their staff, and one of the things he always talks about is making good paint decisions. And I thought Brunson in tonight's game and in games previous this year, he has done a really good job of either finishing or when he doesn't have that, spraying the ball out to create those open catch and shoot threes, which the Knicks did a phenomenal job in creating in this one. And of course, those shots have to fall. And there's been games where the shots have not gone down, and it's created a lot of those bad vibes, just the shot variance of it. And that is something, as observers, as fans of this team, as analysts of this team, we're going to have to wrap our heads around, where is if this team is going to continue to shoot as many threes as they are, and there's no reason to think that won't be the case, then we're going to have to be accustomed to games, stretches where the shots just don't go in, and they're going to have to figure out other ways to win those games. And that is something this team is still trying to figure out. This one, the shot variance was on their side, and they made a host of threes, but they did a great job in creating those threes, led by Jalen Brunson, especially to start that game. I thought he was magnificent, and didn't really feel the negativity that is on the defensive end. It felt like he held up really well on that end as well, and even got in there for a handful of rebounds. I thought he got some deflections, some steals, or some fouls that should have been steals, or turnovers. I felt like he was all over the court on both ends, and it was just, again, his usual brilliant self. But we should not take what he is doing on a night-to-night basis for granted, because he is a game-to-game all-NBA player. He is one of the 10 best offensive players in the sport. I can probably argue that he is more in the top 7-6 the way he's playing right now. And again, once that three-point shot starts going down with a little more regularity, we could be seeing the best Jalen Brunson on the offensive end of his career, which is saying a lot considering what he has done the past few seasons as a New York Knick. He wasn't the only one, of course, that had a big night. And we're 7 or 8 minutes into this. I had to have a little bit of self-awareness not to start the show with this next player, because I know what that narrative would be, and what that would look like and sound like coming from yours truly. But I do want to start this next shout out with one Josh Hart, who has been taking it across the chin from himself, because he has a lot of a significant self-doubt that has to be tamped down from time to time, that can creep in and really mess up and disturb and distort what he views himself as a basketball player, but also taking it on the chin from this fan base. And look, there's a lot of reasons to criticize Josh Hart in terms of his on the court play up to this game, though in the Boston game, I thought he was excellent at times, especially rebounding the basketball, but clearly has not looked like himself. Clearly is, as I said, doubting himself. So to come out tonight and to have 14 points, 8 rebounds, 3 assists, and just look like the Josh Hart we have come accustomed to seeing, the one that we were seeing a lot in that 23-24 campaign where he was coming off the bench, especially in that fateful January, where he just seemed to be all over the court with a minutes load that was more in line with the type of player he is. And it was just really nice to see him come out and just have that verve, that explosiveness, and that energy level that has not always been here this season. And of course, as we have all learned, Fred Katz of The Athletic reporting right before the game tipped off that he's dealing with a nerve injury in his right hand. And it's a injury that is not just affecting him on the basketball court, but basically when he's doing just daily tasks at home, a lot of numbness that he is experiencing. There was a note in there that if surgery was to occur, this is a 3-month recovery, which is not insignificant. That's a serious recovery time. And I don't blame Josh Hart for trying to hold and put that off. I think that he needs to give this a shot. And I think it's a reasonable take and thought from him to give this a shot, to try to work its way through and adjust and maybe figure out how to play with this injury. And at least tonight he was able to play with that injury. And, it's it might be a game-to-game thing with him. Who knows about these nerve injuries where it might be hard to know what Josh Hart you're getting on a night-to-night basis, which could complicate things. But at least tonight, I thought he looked just like himself, and he is a critical piece to this team who all of a sudden is playing a 9-man rotation. And I don't know if Yabusele is on the outs. Seems like Tyler Kolek is on the outs. Yabusele has played basically 5 minutes in the last 2 games, and we don't know how much of that is the lingering knee injury. We don't know how much that is maybe him not being in proper game shape. But right now, and we just saw Mitchell Robinson go down with a right ankle or foot injury that luckily wasn't serious. He was able to come back into the game. But that does sort of speak to the idea that right now, at least in the front court, the Knicks' depth right now is very concerning. And you're going to need Josh Hart to win at the highest level. This group, to be at their best, is going to require Josh Hart to be amongst at least their 9-man rotation, potentially in a shortened playoff series, their 8-man rotation. So I think there is a lot of good that hopefully can come out of this and to carry over. But I do want to just caution everyone that is like, Josh Hart, just get the surgery and just hang out and rest for 3 months because you're not helping us. Well, who exactly do you want to be playing minutes at the 3, at the 4 right now for this New York Knicks team? If what we're seeing now, if Yabusele really is not going to be capable of playing NBA minutes right now, whether by injury or by poor play or being close to 300 pounds, they Knicks don't have a ton of bodies in the front court. So that is something to be mindful of when we are flippantly asking Josh Hart to just go sit out for several months because of a nerve injury, because this team needs Josh Hart right now. Because I understand the idea of like playing this for May and June, but you have to try to start stacking up some wins here if you're going to be upwards of 50 wins and get home court in the first round for the second round. So I think this is incumbent upon Josh Hart and the Knicks to try to see this through. If he's willing to play through this, I see no reason why, if he's been giving clearance that he's not going to make this worse, that he shouldn't give this a go. And hopefully tonight can be a launching pad to get him playing like the player since he was acquired by Leon Rose, that we've seen time and time again. So I thought Josh Hart played a nice game, really strong game, and just looked like himself. Speaking of looking more like himself, I thought Karl-Anthony Towns on the offensive end. This wasn't the most dynamic Karl-Anthony Towns performance, but this was a Karl-Anthony Towns, to me, that played within the game and didn't let that affect what he was outputting in terms of his impact on the game. There's been discussions, and even from Towns himself, about his role in this offense. And I still think the Knicks are trying to figure it out. In the second half, it seemed like they were leaning a little bit more into the Brunson-Cat 2-man game. There was one pick and roll, or a Cat rolled to the rim. Brunson got him on that drop-off pass, finished at the rim with the dunk. There was another one where Cat didn't pop. He rolled. Brunson thought he was going to pop. So they're still working those kinks out, which, again, we're in year 2 of this pairing. You'd hope there'd be less of that, but there is still some of that. So we're still trying to figure that out. I did like the fact that when Towns was playing as without Brunson in a 5-out look, that Brown allowed him to have the ball and to try to see the floor with cutters around him in a true 5-out look. The drives tonight from Towns weren't always the best, but I did like the fact that he was given the room to operate at the elbow on the left side to get him to a strong right hand. Even when when the Bulls are taking that right hand away, I thought his drives going left, although not great, I do like the idea of him still trying to attack the rim in that way, and did make a couple of passes after taking a couple of dribbles, which we know Towns can have really significant tunnel vision. Once he takes that second dribble, I thought some of his drive decisions passing the ball were really strong and has been his usual elite self with his outlets. He had one to Anunoby for a finish. So I do think Cat played a strong game overall on the offensive end. The defense, I thought at times was really bad. Frankly, I thought his 3-point defense, especially, was just, his issue is he'll get out there, but his contest hand will stay at his waist until the shooter is already almost at the release point. And I've talked about this plenty, but if you're not disturbing the sight line to the rim and you're getting a late contest up, it's really almost like a wide open shot. And he did that 3 or 4 times in this one and gave up open threes in effect to the Bulls. But he did seem to tighten up his defense in the second half, as the Knicks in general, I thought, played a better second half on the defensive end overall. But a 20-15 5-assist night for Towns, taking only 11 shots, got to the free throw line 8 times, made both his 3-point shots. Just a really strong floor game from Karl-Anthony Towns. And that is the type of game he might have more of these sort of performances than his explosive 30-plus games that he had last year. But when you have more onus on getting your wings involved, Bridges and Anunoby, especially with the ball in their hands, I think this is more of where Towns is going to have to just accept the role and the change. And once you accept the change, then you can start attacking it. It's like you accept it, and then you can attack it in a really positive way. Have the awareness, again, to use another A word, the awareness, the attacking ability, once you accept it, to really lean into what the Knicks need from him. And it was more of what you're going to get tonight, I feel like, than the performances that we saw last year, where it was more high octane offense. Because what you're getting out of Bridges and Anunoby is just more on-ball responsibility. I'm speaking of Bridges. I mean, we have to mention the playmaking, because the scoring wasn't there much tonight. Only scored 10 points, but 9 assists as he continues to pile up these assist numbers. And if there's anything that Mike Brown has done, I think the most impressive thing on the offensive end is unlocking this playmaking ability from Bridges, which, I thought he's shown some, especially that first year in Brooklyn, but it's not been something that has been consistent. But this is probably, in terms of him controlling the offense, more like the Brooklyn style than the Phoenix style, where Phoenix, he was really just a tertiary ball handler at best. With the Knicks, he is really controlling a lot of their sets, and they're running a lot through him, and it is allowing Brunson to, I think, to have a much less wear and tear on him. And I think Bridges is holding up really well as a playmaker. And I know the Knicks made a lot of jump shots, and I'll have to go back and look at all 9 of those assists to see how many of those were just the luck of the shots going down and how many of them were his creation, passing the player open. So I think there are some, I do have some pause and reservation about that part of it, but you can't deny the fact that Bridges has taken a major leap as a playmaker this year. And I think Mike Brown deserves a lot of credit for that. On the season right now, he's up to almost 6 assists per game, Mikal Bridges. And that is a major, I think, positive long-term for where this offense needs to be, especially when we get to May and June and you get more ball pressure and you get teams being more locked in and taking Jalen Brunson away and making life hard on him. If you get Mikal Bridges 65 plus games, 70 games of having this sort of workload and responsibility with the ball in his hands, that will only benefit him when the games get really physical and teams are getting into him. And that is probably the one area that I'm a little skeptical about. Can Bridges perform like this consistently when great defenses are locked into him? I think that is to be determined, but I think Mike Brown is giving him the best shot to do that by allowing him early in the season to really have the ball in his hands in a way that is not reckless, because he can get sloppy with both his passing and his ball handling, but putting him in positions to where he can make plays comfortably. When the Knicks, they had another one of those, a few different wheel sort of sets where he'll run an angle pick and roll to get to his right hand, and everyone, as he goes right, all the players fill to the right. Brunson missed 1-3 on the right side. I think they called it a 2, maybe, but I think Bridges in those sets, because it's a very comfortable read. Usually that player going from the slot to the corner is going to be open, and Bridges, because he has that ability to get up high and pass the ball over the top, can avoid some of those deflections that a gap defender is going to try to get as they're retreating back to that player, whether it's McBride or Brunson going to the corner on that wheel flow. And Bridges can, because he is so long and because he passes the ball over the top of his head on those plays, he can remove that worry that you get a deflection in that spot. So he's really well suited to in that specific set with the Knicks. So I think that's something they're going to continue to do. The Bulls ran it a few times, got the Knicks a couple of times. The Knicks are now calling it out. You can hear them yelling on the broadcast, wheel, wheel, wheel. It's become such a prevalent action in the NBA that it's going to be interesting to know how gap defenders and how you load up early, if teams get a little more conservative on that, because there's so many offenses now running that. And if you're loaded up early and aggressive, you're more susceptible to that wheel concept. And it'll be curious, that push and pull, as more teams start to utilize that, because, the Heat are now, that's the basis of their offense. Basically, the Knicks have used it plenty. We know, Cleveland runs that a lot, and more teams are starting to use it because it's a really nice way to generate open threes, driving gaps for the player on the ball, catch and shoot threes, all that. So I think that's going to be interesting to monitor. But Bridges on the Knicks for this team, well suited for that action. And then you get Brunson and McBride, a lot of open threes out of it, which is always good to see. And then the final player, or two more actually, but I want to mention OG Anunoby, who, again, elite two-way play. He is having a really strong, in my opinion, strong for him start to the year defensively. I know in the previous Bulls game, he, amongst most of the Knicks, really didn't seem to have a lot on the defensive end, but he got the Giddey matchup sometimes in this one. Seemed to hold up well at times, though there was one possession where he was basically locked into Giddey's hip for a full court Giddey drive that somehow Giddey was able to finish, but it wasn't because Anunoby played poor defense. It was a great defensive possession for Anunoby. Giddey just made a great shot, but I thought OG was really locked in on both ends of the court tonight. 21 points, 4 assists, 3 made threes. I mentioned the defense. If you look at OG on the season now, he's shooting 40% from 3, taking about 8 per night, averaging 17. He's not going to make an all-star team because it's just going to be very difficult for him or even Bridges to sort of leapfrog Cat and get into that mix. But it'll be very interesting to see if Bridges or Anunoby can get that narrative going, if the Knicks can start stacking up some wins, because I think Brunson's close to a lock. And I don't know if Cat is going to have the sort of numbers that he's used to having. So maybe there is more of a chance for Anunoby or Bridges to be the second Knick in the All-Star game. But I do think Anunoby early on is having what I would term as an all-defense type start to this year, and just continues to blow up possessions. Had one steal and a dunk where he deflects the ball, then literally runs over Trey Jones to scoop the ball up and finish. He's a phenomenal two-way player. And like Brunson, easy to take for granted his performance on a night-to-night basis, but really allows the Knicks more than any player, I think, to get their three-point volume up to where it needs to be, or where Mike Brown wants it to be, because Anunoby, when he was brought over to the Knicks, was always known as a high-quality corner three-point shooter. But last year, you saw him start to expand that range a little bit and to be an effective above-the-break shooter. And that's carried over to this year. And if If that's not going to happen, then it's going to be very difficult for the Knicks to shoot 40 plus threes a night if Anunoby is not a 3-point volume shooter from above the break, and he's making them at a pretty good clip. Bridges as well, making above the break threes at a pretty good clip. So those two guys, Anunoby specifically, but both of them helping the Knicks to juice that 3-point volume. And then the final player, just to give flowers to, Jordan Clarkson gave a lot back on the defensive end, but especially in the first half, not so much in the second half, but it gave the Knicks and the Knicks fans a glimpse of what he can be for this team as an on-ball creator. Not a guy that, and this is one of those things where you watch him more, you realize he's not someone that's going to blow by a defender and get all the way to the basket, but he does figure out ways to get into the paint more than you would think. And his paint touches tend to be in the high paint area, not in the restricted area. And I thought tonight did a nice job of, as Brunson did, making reads out of the high paint, because you can get in. That's the area where when you get into the high paint, and maybe technically it's not a mid-range shot, but if you're taking a lot of those from that area, I think you ask any defensive coordinator in the NBA and they'll be more than happy to give up those attempts. I thought Clarkson, when he got into there, because you're typically still causing a reaction, creating that spray out to cause the closeout. And I think that's where Clarkson really shined. Obviously scored the basketball plenty. I believe he had 15 points on the night, did so rather efficiently. I thought was clearly his best offensive performance. And then the second half did tighten up his defense enough to where it felt like he was a major positive. First half, especially possessions with Cat, really rough on the defensive end. It felt like the Bulls' intent there was to get Cat involved in the action and then have Clarkson as low man defender to come over and help. Clarkson, a lot of those was late getting over. So when Cat was getting beat on those Jalen Smith rolls to the basket, there was no help defense on the back line. That's the Bulls really designing an offense that is going to put pressure on the Knicks' worst defensive players. So I thought there was less of that in the second half, and that's the push and pull with Clarkson, of course, where can the offense be good enough for what he's going to inevitably give up on the defensive end? I thought for the most part tonight, he was a positive on the floor because his offense was that strong. And he's a guy that's going to have nights like this where, maybe the Knicks don't make a lot of threes and the shot variance is going the other direction. And you're going to need Clarkson to come in to games and just create offense for you. Better passer than you think, and can be really effective getting into the paint and if he's making good decisions and not getting into his floater game too often, I think you're going to get positive play out of him. He's needed because right now, if this is a true 9-man rotation for the foreseeable future, then you're going to need those 9 players to really step up and perform. I'm very curious to see how Mike Brown plays this going forward, specifically with Kolek and Yabusele. Again, Mitch going down and looking like he really injured his ankle. Luckily, nothing too serious. It doesn't seem like. It does beg the question before we transition here. The Knicks center depth, big man depth, because it's just not good right now. Huck Porty seems to, at least right now, just not up for the task. So I mentioned Yabusele, and you have the specter of a Mitch injury just kind of casting a pale over this team. If they lose Mitch for an extended period, then it's just going to be very tough for them to string together quality minutes from the 4 and the 5. But right now, or at least in this one, if you're going to make as many threes as the Knicks made and you get to the line 22 times, you make every one, you're going to be okay. But it is a word of caution right now about where the Knicks are, where they stand with their center rotation, because there's just not a ton there, especially if Mike Brown is resistant, at least to start games, in having Karl-Anthony Towns be the 5 for especially against teams that can really impact the game on the offensive end and put him into a lot of dangerous positions as a defender. But we'll see. At least tonight, shots went down. Ship was righted. Knicks 3-game losing streak ends, and this extended homestand gets off on the right foot with a 128-116 win against the Chicago Bulls. Before we get to your super chats, I do want to talk about what we saw today. Speaking of winning, Fanatics Sportsbook betting and sweating, because our guys, John, Jeff, and Mensa, shout out to those three. Jonathan gets that Bridges assists 4+, and once again, he nails it because he's been on this one, I think, from the beginning about Bridges overs on the assists. So he nails that with Bridges getting about 9. Jeff McBride 3s. I think Deuce hit 2 of those, at least 2. So that's a win. And then Mensa, Jalen Brunson 27. That hits. So that parlay boost at a plus 440. So shout out John, shout out Jeff, and shout out Mensa for nailing the Fanatics Sportsbook betting and sweating. And the Knicks get a win, and our guys get a win as well, nailing that parlay. So shout out those three. And with all that said, let's get into our super chats on the night. Leading us off is Norman Jean. What's up, Norman? We needed this. A lot of positives. Vintage, Hart, second half. Clarkson, confidence. 3s draining. Cat. Lost Cat driving. Thank you. Even though not finishing. Yeah, I didn't mention that. And then Brunson, effort leading the team. Yeah, Norman, it was a complete team win. I think you hit on all the things I mentioned there in the monologue. We would like to see Cat's driving be a little more effective. Did have the one, of course, flailing layup miss, and the Bulls made a 3 on the other end. But you sort of have to live with the fact that you're going to need Cat's drive game to round out this offense, and you're just going to have to live with some of those crazy, wild forays to the basket leading to good offense for the other team time and time again. But overall, I think Cat's drive game is still an important piece to this team winning. But yeah, the vintage Hart, Clarkson getting that confidence, does feel like a guy that is still trying to find his way on this team in a winning environment. Love the 3s going down. It makes everything sort of feel good. And I love the fact that you mentioned Jalen Brunson again, leading the team, and then leading the team with 19 points, as I mentioned in that first quarter. He has come out really strong in a lot of these games, and almost it feels like taking the game, and really trying to put his imprint on it right off the bat. And I think tonight, especially, and I think Alan Hahn on the broadcast even mentioned it, because the Knicks had 3-game losing streak, because the team was struggling. It felt like he wanted this one a little more than your typical game against the Bulls in November, and played like it. And he was his usual brilliant self that we, again, need to continue to celebrate and appreciate. Thank you, Norman. Appreciate it. Mr. Fabro, what's up, Mr. Fabro? Appreciate you. It was only a matter of time before Josh Hart reminded us why we love Josh Hart. Well, I would say most of us love Josh Hart. I don't know about everyone in the fan base who were clamoring for him to go under the knife for the next several months. But the point is, it is really critical. I think even the lowest of the Josh Hart haters would have to admit that he is important to this team ultimately getting to their ceiling, because a lot of the issues with Josh Hart in terms of like the frustration with many in the fan base was based on the minutes he was playing, and the fact that he was starting, and the fact that he, and admittedly so, is not the greatest fit with Karl-Anthony Towns. So I do think we have to compartmentalize that true criticism with the fact that Hart coming off the bench is a player that I think every other 29 teams in the NBA would want to have. I mean, he is the quintessential high energy, versatile bench piece that you would be crazy not to want. And he's, 30 years old. I don't think this is the case of his body necessarily breaking down because he is past his prime. I think he is dealing with at least 2 injuries, and these are injuries that maybe the back is healed completely. We're hoping that the finger, the hand thing gets better through time, and he could figure out a way to play through it. But they're going to need him, because just look at the rotation tonight, and look at the players that Mike Brown seems to have the most confidence in right now, at least, and try to tell yourself, can this team sustain elite offense or, high quality play with Josh Hart not being an important piece of it? Like, if Josh Hart misses 3 months, like, where are the Knicks going right now? And I think, it's easy for us to say, well, it all that matters is end of the year and the playoffs. Well, yeah, that is true. And clearly the previous coach put too much stock in the regular season, especially early on. But it is still very important to get wins in the NBA in the regular season. It is still very important to have home court advantage in the playoffs. So let's just be clear about that. And for this team to start stacking up victories, they're going to need Josh Hart to be more like the one that we saw tonight. And I know that if Josh Hart is going to miss extended time, this team is going to be in worse off for it. And it was really nice, at least for tonight, to see Josh Hart kind of remind everyone of who he is as a basketball player. Thank you, Mr. Farber. Appreciate it. Maxwell Warner, appreciate you, Maxwell. Thank you so much. Josh fucking Hart, we love you. He is in a lot of ways a bellwether for this team, and it might give some out there, make them a little queasy, knowing that Josh Hart is as important to how this team plays as he really is. But this team just needs him. And, he has skills and he has certain traits as a basketball player that most of his teammates don't possess. And that's why when he is at his best, and tonight wasn't even his best, but when he is playing at a high level, it really stands out amongst this group of higher skilled offensive players that don't necessarily play with the same sort of fire, to use a cliche, or energy as Josh Hart. But it's really nice to see that version of him. And again, as I mentioned earlier, hopefully this is to springboard him to a nice stretch of games. And maybe we can get the best version of Josh Hart. Maybe that's still there. Maybe we could still get the Josh Hart that when he was required in the 22-23 season, that was his best role all along. And I mentioned that 23-24 campaign, that January, where he was the sixth man and just changing the complexion of every game he entered. That Josh Hart is still there. And we need to sort of get used to and get accustomed to the idea of he is a incredibly important player on this team. And if he's playing well, then I think the team is going to play well. And again, he doesn't have to shoot 40% from three to play well. And that's kind of the beauty of Josh Hart, is because he can do all the other things and still impact the game at a very high level, especially if the minutes are 15 to 20 minutes, maybe 23 minutes, and not, of course, the 35 plus that he saw over the past couple of years. So that's what we want to see. We want to see a Josh Hart playing a role that is more suited for what he is as a basketball player. And if he could do that and be relatively healthy and play at a strong level, then that is a very, very important piece to this team, and one that they need pretty significantly to win at the highest level. Thank you, Maxwell. Appreciate it. Greg, film stuff. What's up, Greg? Appreciate you contributing and hanging out with us. Thank you. This was Cat's best game of the season. He really toughed it out there tonight, doing other things opposed to just scoring. Loved what Clarkson did on both ends. Hart was classic Hart. This win was like Mike Brown's vision. Yeah, I mean, that last line, because I've kind of hit on the other aspects to your comment, Greg, I think this really was, in a lot of ways, kind of what Mike Brown envisioned for this team at their best. And it felt like the decisions to spray the ball out and to take shots that were not just catch and shoot shots, but ones that were in rhythm with that would be considered, like, if you're going to rate shots, green being the absolute best catch and shoot, wide open, yellow, maybe you're slightly contested, or a red where the shot is not there, or it's off the dribble, a pull up. The Knicks took a lot of green shots today. They took a lot of shots that were in rhythm, that were sort of created by the initial drive and the initial action. But I thought that this was what Mike Brown wanted. You get this high impact on ball scorer in Jalen Brunson that has a ton of on ball and off ball gravity. You have a player at the 4 in Karl-Anthony Towns that can do a lot of things, as we know, but even when he is not scoring, can certainly space the floor, can roll, can pop, can play make when the plays in front of him, can do a lot of things in that way. And then you have these two wings that are threats in transition that can both now shoot the ball at a high level with volume. This really did feel like, and then Josh Hart off the bench with McBride, and then you have those two impacting the games. I didn't mention Deuce in the monologue, but I felt like he was more in control of this one. Took 3 mid-range shots that I thought were bad shots. He needs to just, I know he can make them, but I just don't love those. If Deuce is not getting to the rim or taking catch and shoot threes, like I just think the off the dribble 2s from mid range. I know one of them was a 2 for 1. So give him the pass on that one, but at least 2 out of 3 I thought were just bad decisions. But he played a stronger game, made 2 threes. He is, again, like Hart, critically important for this bench unit that was really dynamite for most of the game, scoring the basketball, I thought, and making shots. Clarkson, Shamet made a few threes. And I kind of agree in terms of Cat's game. I thought it was, like, overall best floor game of the season for him. And hopefully he can just lean into this version of him and what's needed for this team, because it's not always going to be him sort of in the mid-30s scoring the basketball and carrying the offense at times, because I think Bridges and Anunoby take a little bit of that away from him. But if this is for the greater good, then maybe long-term, this is what's best for the team. Now the offense has to be great for an extended period, and they have to win a lot of games for that to be the right call by this head coach. And I don't think this is should be viewed as demoting Cat or relegating him to a third, secondary or third option on offense. I think it's just incumbent upon the coach to get more out of the wings on offense. And if that means that Towns has to have a little bit less in terms of the responsibility to help carry this offense, then I do think long-term it could work out, but it's going to have to be something that's going to be borne out in the results. The process is I think sound, but even if I agree with it, if the results ultimately aren't going to be there, then we're going to have a right to criticize and question it. But at least in this one, I do think, to Greg, your point, we did see, I think, the vision of what Mike Brown wanted on offense. And then I thought on defense, they were just, a meaner, tougher, angrier team that was clearly annoyed about how Friday night went. And I know Ayo DeSumo didn't play, so that matters. But they seem to be less interested in allowing the Bulls to get to the rim anytime they wanted to, and created turnovers, got out in transition, a lot of transition threes. So yeah, this was what Mike Brown wanted. And again, the shots went down, so that sort of helps make things look better than maybe they they would normally, but at least for tonight, yeah, this is how Mike Brown wants to play. And the goal is you're going to get more of these nights than the last 3 games, for sure. Thank you, Greg. Really appreciate it. Rich McLeod, what's up, Rich? Thank you for checking in. Well, that was certainly a lot more fun. Yeah. This winning games, it felt like, I don't know if you guys feel the same way. It felt like this was Knicks were coming to this one on like a 6-game losing streak and not a 3-game losing streak. But as I mentioned at the top, it felt like there was maybe a level of nervousness, anxiety that kind of transcended where the team actually was playing. But I think that a lot of it is just normal stuff when a team with high expectations has a struggling, rough start to the year, but also more in line with how New York fan bases are. They get, I think, rightfully so, viewed as the smartest fan base in the world, frankly. And when they're, in terms of how they support their team, it is bar none elite, but there's a level of pessimism and that can maybe come out in ways that most other fan bases would hold in a little bit and just give the team a little more time to work their kinks out. And maybe they're feeling all that and they're saying it to their buddies but New Yorkers are louder, and with social media being what it is, have this option and this avenue to express these thoughts. So you're seeing, I think, it come out in ways that, growing up watching this team, it didn't feel like it was always there. But again, we're now hearing it and seeing it more, and the players are, Josh Hart specifically, seeing it and hearing it themselves. So I do think there is it's fair and reasonable to expect this fan base to be really hard on this team. But I do think it's, in a lot of ways, quintessential, like New York style pessimism that is just, it's not a criticism, but it's just like this fan base can get on their team pretty hard, and they expect a lot and they demand a lot. And that's why playing specifically for the Knicks has always been, in my mind, tougher than any of the other New York sports teams because of the demand this particular fan base places on their players and their coaches and their front office and their owners. And I think that is just par for the course, and in a way makes winning here, when that eventually happens, will make it it's a beautiful thing. And so I do think it makes sense in a way that this fan base was a little on edge after 3-game losing streak, which made it feel like more of like a 6-7 game losing streak. But maybe this one win can sort of quell that a little bit and make those good vibes return. And this homestand, I think, is perfectly set up for this team to have a 6-1 stand and really get out of this feeling good about where they are as a basketball team. Thank you, Rich. Appreciate it. I am AK Legend. What's going on? Thank you so much for checking in. Congrats to JB on 9,000 career points. Yes, shout out. At Benji, Clarkson has arrived. Cat looked good. Yabu still needs a treadmill. This was fun. Let's go Knicks. Yeah, JB scored his 9,000th point in his career. In this one, congrats, Jalen Brunson. And as I am AK Legend points out, Benji, number one Jordan Clarkson fan. And so for Benji's sake, really nice to see Clarkson come out and have a strong outing. As I'm saying that, I am just quickly going to pull up Benji's grade because I'm very curious to see if they're out yet. Did he give Clarkson an A? He did not. He gave him a B+. That is, I think, a fair number because of the defensive end, but on offense, certainly an A performance. Why don't we just give Benji's grades right down the line, shall we? Brunson A-, Bridges B+, Anunoby A-, Towns A-, Robinson C+, McBride B+, Clarkson B+, Shaman B+, Hart B+. So solid grades all around, except Mitch getting a C+. Mitch only played about 13 minutes in this one. I thought his first stretch in the first quarter was rough to start the game, but came in, had a brief rest, came back in pretty quickly in the first quarter. I thought had a great 2-minute stretch in that one, creating offensive rebounds, defending the rim, doing all the Mitch things, but he's still working his way, I think, into game shape. And then I am AK Legend mentioning Yabusele, not in game shape. So hopefully he can figure whatever's going on with him, whether it's the injury, whether it's the weight, he needs to figure that out, because as we've been talking about, the Knicks kind of need him to have a true 9-10 man rotation here, because other injuries are going to occur, and Yabusele was brought in to be in the rotation. So definitely not feeling great that after 6 games, he's kind of on the outs. All right. Thank you, I am AK Legend. Appreciate it. Mr. Fabro again. What's going on, Mr. Fabro? Thank you so much. Lots of positives in this game, but 48% from 3 with sus defense is not a sustainable winning formula. Yeah, their 3-point defense right now is just not great. In this one, I mentioned Cat just being a little late getting a contest up on some of those threes. I don't know what to feel about their defense on the whole. I think they've been okay in spurts, but if I'm trying to say at this point, do I view this defense as average or above average? I think right now, I'd call this like an average defense with the ceiling to maybe get to above average if we're going to get and that's a big question. I think you need Mitchell Robinson healthy for a significant portion of these games to be above average, because I don't think they're going to be able to sustain quality defense over a course of a year if Mitchell Robinson is not a big piece of the puzzle. And when he went down with that injury briefly, we were all thinking it. We were all thinking about how rough it's going to look if he's not there defending. But you'd have to lean into the offense, and we did see some Cat with the 5-out look, and I think that ultimately it's going to be the big question from Mike Brown. Like, is that going to be more of a look to start games, especially if Mitch doesn't play? In the games that Mitch doesn't play, like, does he start McBride at this point? Because when Mitch went out, McBride was a sub for him. So I don't know if that was a hint that he would start McBride if when Mitch misses his next game. Very interested. And that could have been McBride's spot in the rotation in terms of coming in at that point in the game. But I did find it at least curious that when Mitch went down, McBride was the one that came in for him, and they went with that McBride with the starters group that we've all been sort of clamoring for season and change. Thank you, Mr. Farber. Appreciate it. Have a great night. Hush Z. What's up, Hush Z? Appreciate you. Interesting stuff with Yabu. Is he out of the rotation, or will they wait till he slims down a bit so we can play some forward minutes? Yeah, they definitely need forward minutes on this team. Seeing if there's anything, and who knows if they actually asked him the question regarding Yabusele, but I would imagine someone from the Knicks beat would have at least asked Mike Brown about Yabusele, who again, roughly 5 minutes of game action in the last 2 games since coming back from injury, and nothing that I'm seeing. Kevin, if you see anything happen to find anything on Yabusele's, there was a question of Mike Brown regarding his standing in the rotation. Be curious to see that, because I think it's fair to say it's a performance thing. It's fair to say it could be a lingering knee thing or a lingering poundage thing, because he's not moving well. And that's the part that's complicated, is we don't know if it is the knee. But to me, he wasn't moving well in the preseason. and didn't move well early in the year before he had the injury. So I think it would be more in line with him just not being in proper game shape, which, look, we can quibble with that number that was reported regarding the Knicks weight and height and all that, but he coming in significantly heavier than what he played at last year it's very disappointing. And he's looking like a player that is not in game shape. And that's where I think I'm gonna, even if I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt and saying it's not really, maybe he's not that heavy, but he's playing like a guy that's that heavy. And it's worrisome that he might be on the outside looking in terms of the rotation. He is a player coming into the year that does a lot of things offensively that the Knicks need in terms of his ability to stretch the floor, his ability to screen. I think he's a truly effective screener, intuitive screener. When he's paired with Brunson, I feel like those two could have a pretty dynamic pairing because he's a better screener than Cat, and theoretically he can shoot it at a level that's threatening. But it's all going to have to be whether he can hold up athletically, because we know in terms of his ground bound style of defense, his lack of lateral movement, there are very significant limitations already. And at least with Philadelphia, it felt like you could switch to them a little bit and he can move his feet reasonably well, hold up decently against NBA fours. But that player that we saw last year just doesn't feel like the same guy right now, in terms of his athleticism. And that is the big worry right now in terms of where he is and in terms of how important he really is for this roster. Because you're going to get injuries. You're going to get Anunoby miss time. Hart's going to miss time likely. And we know Mitch is going to miss a bunch of games. So Cat's going to miss his games. Like Yabusele, he's going to be needed here, especially in the regular season. So he needs to figure out how to get himself into game shape and then play much better when he's out there, assuming he gets back in the rotation, which is to be determined, I guess. Thank Hush Z. Appreciate you. Eric Gentile. What's up, Eric? Thank you for checking in. Yabusele is situational. Yeah, I would say that. Not someone who has the backing or the trust of the head coach. And it's really happened. That lack of trust has happened really fast. Usually, guys, when you're brought in as a free agent, you have a little more rope, which gives me a little bit of pause here that we could be potentially dealing with an injury thing, because it would be anti-Mike Brown to completely relegate a player to the bench. So it's either the injury or it's him not being in game shape, I guess. Kev, you mentioned you have a clip from Mike Brown talking about Yabu.
Yeah. I could just do this we running and gunning.
I just chose basically, I haven't seen it in the second half for much at all. Tied into his rehabilitation and conditioning.
No, that's just me, and I could probably play 10 guys, right? But it's not going to be 10; it's more 9.5. And so there's going to be somebody that has a half, and I got minutes for him in both halves, but not a ton. And he's just got to go out there and give us whatever he can give us. And I just chose nothing that he did. It was just rotation based, and got a little funky because Mitch went out early, and then he came back, and so it was my call. But Curse has played well. He's got to keep himself ready because he's going to continue to get minutes, and I just got to try to find more if I can. But there's not going to be a lot more for when you start talking 9, 10 guys. It's not going to be a ton for that 9th or 10th guy.
All right.
Thank you, Kev. It was a Giants clip playing, but
Appreciate you, man. Thank you. Yeah, so according to Mike Brown, at least in that clip, this isn't an injury thing. It's not a game shape thing. This is I want to play a 9.5 man rotation thing. And I'm tightening the rotation, shortening it up, and Yabusele, Kolek are kind of on the outs. If you're going to be playing 9, if Mitch is healthy and Mitch is going to play in the game, I think you're going to see basically a 9-man rotation. And you're probably, I'm guessing here, when Mitch misses games, you're going to see a more expanded rotation. But I think the idea here is we're a handful of games into the season and Yabusele is already out of the rotation in effect. And we can talk, Mike Brown can say, yeah, I played him minutes in both halves. But playing 3 minutes in a basketball game, you are not in the rotation. You're out. You're, as Eric puts it, you are in situational basketball at this point. Just getting the minutes here. Yabusele played under 2 minutes tonight. Played about 3 minutes Friday night's game. So we're talking basically 5 minutes of game action. That you are not a rotation player. And you're not even 9.5, as Mike Brown said it. You are. This is 9.25 at best, and that's not a good look if you're Yabusele, to be completely honest. Like what have, you've done enough here to lose the confidence of your head coach in a handful of basketball games. Now and again, I have no reason to this is no reporting. This is nothing except guessing that coming into camp out of shape is going to make any leash that you have shorter. And if you are coming into camp out of shape and you are performing at a level that is below the standard of this coach and team, it makes sense that you would have a quicker hook. And I don't think Mike Brown saying Yabu's got to stay ready is him trying to beat around the bush. I think Yabusele's got it by staying ready. I think he means like you better keep yourself and get better game shape if you're going to want to see meaningful minutes here, because right now he's out of the rotation. In effect, he was a signing that was, for the most part, pretty roundly applauded in terms of the value. And right now, that signing is looking kind of like a dud. And we're early. November has just occurred. November 2nd. So this could all change in a few weeks. Mitch can miss a game. Yabusele can come in and play 15 minutes and perform at a high level. But we have to just be honest that if you're a handful of games into the season and you are already out of the rotation, that's a rough one for Gershon. There's no way to sugarcoat that one. Thank you, Eric. Appreciate you. And thank you, Kev, for pulling that up. Drew P, what's up, Drew? I now expect Mikal to make his threes. Yes, and above the break threes, right, Drew? That's the big difference here in this campaign, is that he looks confident in his 3-point shot above the break. He made a high number of 3-pointers from the corners at a high percentage. This year now, more flow in his shot from above the break. Last year, it seemed like he had a significant disjoint between the lower and upper half of his body in terms of his 2-motion shooting. And he's still a high release 2-motion shooter now, but it just all feels more fluid than it did last year. And because the energy transfer in a 2-motion shooter is less, it doesn't occur with as much seamlessness as if you were a Steph Curry 1-motion shooter, or Trae Young or Dame Lillard, those guys, or like a kind of a hybrid Kevin Durant, where you kind of or Kawhi Leonard, guys that have elements of 1 and 2-motion shooting. Mikal Bridges is a legitimate 2-motion guy, meaning there's a break on the set point and then he goes forward with his shot. That requires a lot of, you have to get really accustomed to the amount of upper body strength needed when you're shooting above the break on those shots. And it was clear that last year he was not comfortable with that range because he was really he didn't have a way physically to get the ball to the rim in the same way that he does this year. By smoothing out the release a little bit and maybe getting a little bit stronger with it, it's looking a lot better. Not just because the ball's going in, but it to the eye looks like a more comfortable shot that he has more rhythm in, and he has obviously more confidence in. So very, very nice to see those threes going in. Drew, completely agree there. Thank you for your contribution. Appreciate you. Paul McFarland, what's up, Paul? Appreciate it. We are going undefeated at home and in November. Tibbs like rotation tonight. I wonder if more guys get some action tomorrow versus the Wizards. Let's fucking go Knicks. Yeah. So I had assumed no Mitch tomorrow. So we've been hard on Yabusele, I think fairly, but we'll see about the rotation tomorrow. And if we do get it, as I'm guessing we would get a more expanded rotation if Mitch doesn't play, and then just basically trying to get more guys in there so we don't have your top guys playing 35 minutes tonight. The highest minute totals were pretty reasonable because you had a pretty comfortable lead in the second half. Towns played 36, led the team. Anunoby 35, Bridges 34, Brunson only 32, Hart 26, McBride 23. So minutes weren't crazy tonight at all, but it would be, I would expect maybe you get a full 9-10 man rotation tomorrow against a team you should beat. So maybe a night where Mike Brown experiments a little bit with the rotation, get guys in that haven't been playing of late as much, build up maybe some confidence, do the things that Mike Brown is more apt to do. But tonight it was more of a, as you mentioned, Paul, like a Tibbs-like rotation and game where there's certain games on the calendar where the importance of them takes an outsized level. And tonight just felt like one that was a little more important than your typical Sunday night game in early November. And Jalen Brunson specifically came out tonight and played like that. And the coached like that. And the Knicks were led by their coach and their superstar player. And I think keyed their approach tonight, and all the other players sort of fell in line and performed at a high level as well. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Jessica, what's up, Jess? Appreciate you checking in. I love that we are seeing in-game adjusting from the players and the coach. The losses will inform the wins. Love seeing them trust each other. Let's go Knicks. Yeah, Jess, I think we did see some adjusting, especially on the defensive end where it felt like Mike Brown was searching a little bit. We saw him go to more of a switch-heavy scheme in the second quarter. We saw a few possessions where Josh Hart started on Vucevic, which was interesting. It's very unique in Knicks land to see a coach, have that sort of not ability, but desire and awareness to make those sort of in-game adjustments in games that maybe, as I said, had a lot of importance, but also it is still early in the year. So you are in the phase of like trying to figure out what your best rotation is, what your best defensive group, best offensive group, best actions to run. Mike Brown is still trying to figure all this stuff out. And then the team behind the scenes is, the data collection part of it and the analytics. So they're trying to build sort of a picture of what this team does best, what they struggle at, what they can improve, things they want to do more of, do less of. They're still, all these things, a lot of them, except some of the frequency stuff, like shot frequency, specifically 3-point shooting, the amount of threes you're taking can stabilize pretty quickly. A lot of the other stuff, especially when it comes to the efficiency numbers and trying to get a good handle of what actions are best, you're going to need a lot of data for that. So in that data collection period, it makes sense to sort of try to figure out your best pick and roll coverage, the pairings you're playing with. Do you want to just experiment with Karl-Anthony Towns on the floor and having the power forward guard the center, so you take them out of the main pick and roll action? These are things that we didn't see a lot from Tibbs. So I do agree, Jess, it is a breath of fresh air, but we did get some of the Tibbs like tightening of the rotation when the game sort of called for it. I think we saw a little bit of the Mike Brown stuff that I think we're all looking forward to seeing more of, but also some of the old idea of when you need a win and the game's important, you tighten the rotation up and you play the guys you trust the most. And in this one, playing 9 guys that he trusted the most helped get him a win. I need to win. Knicks now 3-3. Thanks, Jess. Appreciate it. Nick Head. What's up, Nick Head? Appreciate it. Thanks for checking in. We never doubted, sort of. Yeah, there was some doubt. Mentioned all the anxiety that was kind of permeating around city of late and within this fan base. This is what this season is going to be. Every losing streak, every time this team struggles, it's going to feel like the world's sort of caving in, and the players are going to have to deal with that because we fired the coach. We have this team that is in a conference that is wide open and a very expensive team with guys that make a lot of money and are very, very good to great basketball players. And on paper, this team should believe they are going to be in the finals come June. But that is also, when things aren't going to go well, going to bring in that doubt that you're referring to. And it's a long season. And I think we're all, if we're going to make it to the end as a fan base, I think we probably should sort of tamp down on how much import we are putting on some of these early season games. But that is this fan base, as I mentioned earlier. That is what we do. And I think that's what separates us from the other 29 fan bases in the National Basketball Association. Thank you, Nick said. Appreciate it. Have a great night. Adam Austin. What's up, Adam? Appreciate it. First super chat of the season. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate you. Love you having coming back to us. Great to see the bench bring energy. Clarkson hitting shots. Hart doing things. More games like this, please. Yeah, it was the bench. So Hart 14, McBride 8, Shamet 9, that's 31, plus Clarkson's 15, 46 points from the bench. I think Mike Breen on the broadcast said the Knicks had one game last year where they were in the 50s, just one. So up, you're in mid 40s scoring off the bench. It's a really good number. And they got really high volume 3-point shooting throughout. Shamet was a part of that bench unit that made all 3 of his threes. Let's just look at Landry Shamet's 3-point shooting on the season. So he is shooting now 42% from 3 on 4 attempts per game. That's per 36, by the way, of almost 9. So Landry Shamet is getting them up when he's in the game. And last year, from basically February on, was roughly a 40% 3-point shooter. And I know Landry Shamet has not been the most consistent of NBA players throughout his career, but we are getting a pretty good sample size of Landry Shamet just being a legitimate great. If we're going to call 40% from 3 on high volume great as a shooter, and I think that is, then he's basically shooting like a great shooter right now. And he's been doing that for longer than you think. And in that bench unit, he's a big piece because he just never stops moving. He's able to find these windows. He does a nice job of getting into the vision of the driver. And that's the thing about when you make those paint decisions as a driver, you really, to really for it to sing, you need the recipient of your pass to get into the passing window. And that's what McBride, Brunson, and Shamet specifically, those three are all great at. They're not classic movement shooters in the way of like a JJ Redick or a Kyle Korver, but they never stop moving in terms of, and Bridges as well. Bridges actually might be the best, to be honest, in terms of moving into open 3-point space. But they all are constant movers, and their eyes are locked into whoever's driving it, and they are just trying to find the sight line. And if they're even with the driver, then they're not going to be open. They can get either deeper into the corner or out farther into the slot wing area on the drive into the paint. That's when you get the spray outs that Mike Brown talks about. So that Shamet, again, excellent at that, can make him in transition as well. So nice to see the bench perform at a high level, led by Josh Hart's energy and just assertiveness, as we've come accustomed to seeing, and really important to see that, as I talked about. But as a whole, the bench had a really phenomenal game, and the bench has been maligned over the past three games, and rightfully so. They've not performed at a high level. So hopefully they can finish this homestand, and we know bench players tend to play better at home. Hopefully they can have a nice round out 6-game stretch at home and start to build on what was a strong game tonight. Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it. Sri, what's up, Sri? Appreciate you checking in here. Jalen Brunson is my little soda pop. Yeah. Little soda pop. Detonating, exploding all over the Bulls in the first quarter. That's for sure. Shook them up. Let it go. 19 points in that first quarter. He could be my little soda pop too. I think he would probably take exception to the little soda pop name, but he is a diminutive player that certainly plays much bigger, and had a few drives in this one. And I talk about being a confrontational driver where he was just bodying the Bulls' taller, bigger players out of the way. He had one to Kevin Huerter where he just discarded him with his left arm, knocked him out of the way for a layup. Just played with force the entire night. And that's the type of, like, he's a rare commodity in the way he brings together all the skill that he has with the balance as an athlete and the strength. Low center of gravity, there's so much to his game that is just unique to him. But to me, it's like you combine the skill with the balance that he can maintain, couple that with the strength, and then you have that. It's just a really tough deal to guard, to manage. And there's only a few guys in the league that can hold up at the point of attack against him. And when you play with guys like Bridges and Anunoby, the 3-point volume, and of course Cat and McBride when he's playing with him, you have these shooting wings, guards, Shamet, throw him in there as well. It's just it's a group that is, I think, playing at a level where allowing Brunson to be at his best. And as I mentioned earlier, not even making his threes yet at his usual level. So when that normalizes, we could be looking at the start of what might be Jalen Brunson's best season as a pro. Thank you, Sri. Appreciate you. Kevin Danishevsky. What's up, Kev? Hart was great tonight. I do think he played like less than a good role player since Jan 1 of last year. So great to see. Is Mikal Bridges as MBPHO Bridges again? I don't know what those letters mean. Kev, you got any help on that one? MBPHO. Oh, is Mikal Bridges Phoenix? Is the Phoenix Bridges here again? Thank you. Yeah, it's like a hybrid Phoenix Brooklyn version of Mikal Bridges right now, because you're getting, I think, the defense that we saw in Phoenix, in that great role-playing ability of him with this playmaking attribute that the Knicks didn't really tap into last year, that he did have in Brooklyn at times. So yeah, it's like more like a hybrid version of him, but in terms of being like an elite role player, yeah, it's like the Phoenix one with the obviously what's more asked more of him on the offensive end. He is probably, I know we're 6 games in, but this might be his best overall start to an NBA season. And I mentioned this, I think on the last X's and O show, that we all thought it was going to be a better Bridges year. Felt right. And it's happened almost to a T, exactly how we thought it would. Maybe we didn't think there would be as much playmaking responsibility, but I thought we all believe we get a better version of Bridges, and we certainly have, and then some. He's been great. And yeah, I don't think Hart was a big time role player post Jan 1 either, partly because his body just seemed to be breaking down on him. But yeah, I would agree with that. That's fair. And agree that he was great tonight. Hopefully continues that. Thank you, Kev. Appreciate it. All right, I think this might be our last one of the night, and we are wrapping up with the one and only Robert W. Cross. What's up, Robert? Hello, Mr. DJ. I hope you had a nice summer. Thank you. I did. Appreciate it. Likewise to you. How are the Knicks going to deal with Cat plus JB getting spammed in the pick and roll? Be well. Well, one interesting wrinkle, and again, I'd have to go back and look to see how many possessions it was. I don't think it was a cross match scenario, but we saw Hart guarding Vucevic on a couple times in this one with Cat on the court. That would be one way to maybe mitigate some of that. Another way is if Cat is going to be brought into the action, have him sort of pre-switch out of it, but that does require a lot of communication. And by pre-switching, that's another player basically switches with Cat before Cat as Cat sees the screen happen, he communicates to, let's see, Anunoby, if they're in close proximity to each other, like, you go with my man to the screen, I'll get yours. And that's called a pre-switch. So there are ways to sort of limit the damage being done, but it's at least on the defensive end, is the ultimate question about not only can this team win at the highest level with 2 subpar defensive players, but how do you try to limit the damage on that end? Because even if Brunson is not in the action, teams are going to make sure he is the MIG, or the most important guy. That's the low man responsible for any sort of rim defense as a last line. And if Brunson is that guy, you're basically very limited. If he's not taking a charge, he's just not able to sort of hold up well in that area. So there are other spots on the court you can pick on Brunson that is not necessarily him involved in the action. So that's I think the idea of Mitch is you have enough with Bridges and Anunoby with Mitch to make up for what you are losing on the defensive end with the Cat and JB. That does require a healthy Mitchell Robinson. And we saw tonight how precarious that idea is. And luckily, Mitch got up and came back in the game, but we were all holding our breath at that moment. And we know every time Mitch is on the court and he's wrestling for an offensive rebound, he's stepping on 6 pairs of feet. We're all worried about him having another lower body, ankle, foot injury. And if he can get 60 or 55, 60 games and healthy for the playoffs, we'd all sign up for it, obviously. And healthy Mitch cures a lot of woes on the defensive end. I think that might be the Knicks' best chance at making up for what Cat and JB bring on the defensive end. But it is certainly a major, major question mark that this coach has not answered yet, nor should he, only 6 games in. Thank you, Robert. Appreciate it. All right. And that'll do it for this edition of the Knicks Film School Postgame Show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel as we push towards 50,000 subscribers over on YouTube, and give myself a follow, DJ Ace NBA, over on all the socials. Give Kev Words a follow as well. Killing it with the theme music for KFS as always, and helping me out tonight. Really appreciate you, Kev. Always follow at Knicks Film School on all the social platforms. I mentioned like, subscribe, turn on the alerts, and whenever a new show is dropping or a live program is on, you are alerted right away. Subscribe, rate, review on all those podcast platforms, and try to enjoy this basketball team, which I do think is going to have a nice stretch of games over this expansive home stand here, and just try to tamp down the anxiety. I think it's all going to be good. It's all going to be good, and let's just try to enjoy it. Hope everyone has a great rest of your Sunday, and we will talk soon. Bye-bye.
Must be 21 or over. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Connecticut, call 888-789-7777. Massachusetts, call 800-327-5050. New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY. Maryland, visit mdgamblinghelp.org. Not available in all states. Terms apply. See Fanatics Sportsbook app.